LaRouche, you could say, from a left-wing view, but now he's called a right-winger, and an extreme right-wing by the Washington Post. The truth is he's a populist, and you can learn so much. I mean, he kept saying, we're in danger from asteroids hitting the Earth. The last time he was on 6 months ago. Now look at what's been happening with all these asteroids, and saying we're going through this asteroid intergalactic belt, not just the smaller belt around us. Now they're admitting that's happening. So enough of an introduction. I want to get him on about the economy, all the things that are happening. But first off, sir, joining us via video Skype for TV viewers, for radio listeners, you can go to prisonplanet.tv and watch us right now. What is front and center on your radar screen right now, sir? I want to give you the floor for the next 7-8 minutes till we come back from break, and then I've got some questions of my own, but I want to cover the waterfront, because you said we're going to enter this global crisis, and now North Korea, the Middle East, the dollar, the world bond market, where are we right now? What is most important in your view right now, sir?
The most important thing right now is the danger of thermonuclear war. And as long as we have this president in position, we are at great risk. Now, in these matters of this kind of warfare, you can't really predict, because you don't know whether you're going to get thermonuclear war, which means general human extinction, or we're not. In the meantime, we have a process going on, like other processes, which are important because they are turning points or potential turning points in the situation. For example, we have the agreement by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who are now going to meet with Russians on the question of dealing with things like asteroids and other threats that are now becoming much more prevalent. We also have the need to build up systems to defend us against things that are flying around in nearby space. So we have a situation in which we can identify things that should be discussed and decided, but we have no certainty that any of these things will be the outcome. This is a real war type situation, broader than just warfare itself, in which the questions are more clear than the answers. And that's the way I think we have to keep it. We cannot give you guaranteed answers. We can say what the answers are to certain questions, posed the right way, just like this negotiation is going on with Russia and our Joint Chiefs of Staff now. We don't know what the outcome is, but we do understand the problem. And that's the way it is down the line. But the key thing that is certain, if this president remains in office, the United States is finished.
What are the power structures? What are the factions from your deep connections, Mr. LaRouche, right now, in layman's terms for the audience? Boil it down so we understand the parties involved and what we, the people in the middle, can do to tip the balance towards a less violent outcome.
Well, the first thing we have to think about is we have to think about the United States, not because it is our United States as such, but because the creation of the United States, following what Christopher Columbus did, we had attempts to open up the Atlantic Ocean and to move out from Europe to new options in the other side of the Atlantic. Everything broke down eventually, and suddenly it was our Massachusetts development and things like that, which set the tone for what would be the new replacement for the problems of Europe. So our United States, as corrupted as it has become, nonetheless represents the one major force on which the hope of the world actually depends. There are other nations which will cooperate with us, some certainly, others hopefully. But that's our situation.
So you're saying the world's future really does rise and fall on recapturing the republic that has been the laboratory of true renaissance in the last 300 years?
Absolutely. If you look at the situation in the transatlantic region and elsewhere, there are many nations which have capabilities. Europe has generally lost its capabilities in the recent decades. We in the United States, we have been partly destroyed, especially since the young Bush administration and this current Obama administration. Those forces have almost destroyed the United States. But there is reason to be optimistic. I can't predict the victory, but I can tell you what I'm optimistic about. And I see what happened after the indoctrination and installation of Obama the second round, that I see things in our people, movements among our people, in groups of people, which are, for me, are very optimistic things. When the American people awaken from a long period of quasi-sleep or despair and so forth, and as you see in the political system now, a gradual moving in a new direction, searching for a new direction. And you see it in the members of Congress. You see it in the divisions that are occurring among Republicans. Republicans are no longer fully agreed with each other on most positions. And Democrats, we don't know quite where they are, but we have ideas of where some people would like to go. So we're in a position of potential change.
I agree, but let's look at the geopolitical layout, because you've been putting out some of your video press releases that are particularly powerful when you break down all the factions. What are the Anglo-American British imperialists trying to do right now? What is their game plan around the world? Because they do seem to be particularly agitated right now.
Well, if you look at the history of the United States since the installation of Andrew Jackson, who really was nothing except a big noise, there were other people who were British-directed. British banking terms actually took over the Andrew Jackson administration. And so these are the kinds of things in history we have to look at. But our United States recently has begun to realize how bad the current two presidents, young Bush and Obama, are. And they want to change. And we have I think that's an option for it. There are bigger things than that on the horizon.
Well, I want to cover what you think is most important and what's happening in the banking structure, how bad the global financial meltdown is, because, again, you called it when they got rid of Glass-Steagall back in the late 90s. Mm. And so I want to come back from break and ask you, what you think. Well, briefly, what's happening with Cyprus and the grabbing of that money? Are they trying to cause a panic?
Well, that kind of thing is going on. The general situation is we are at the verge, especially in the transatlantic region. We are on the verge of a general breakdown crisis, which can come on suddenly. We are already in a breakdown crisis. It has not disintegrated yet, but it's on the verge of disintegration.
Lyndon LaRouche is our guest. We'll give you his websites when we come back. But the most important thing is I want you to define breakdown crisis, define triggers for thermonuclear war, and why you've been saying the last year we're entering the greatest danger zone of that in modern history, which is now manifesting. I want you to explain it to us all on the other side. This is important. Lyndon LaRouche is our guest. I'm Alex Jones. And we are back live. Lyndon LaRouche is joining us. Again, we have guests on who've accurately predicted things. And you notice the people that have done that are the ones that are demonized, because the power structure does not want you knowing this. So you've got the Russian bloc, the Chinese bloc, the kind of U.S.-British bloc, the EU, all in the middle of that. And it's all interconnected. But Lyndon LaRouche, what is a breakdown crisis? Why are you saying we're in the danger of a nuclear war? Why did you say that a year ago, and now we're seeing the sabers rattled and Russian fleets going to Cyprus and all of it? In fact, you even sent me a report, Cyprus, Glass-Steagall. So break that down for us.
Well, without Glass-Steagall, the United States economy is finished. We're already in a hyperinflationary explosion. And unless we can cancel most of the banks, which are not Glass-Steagall banks, or don't conform to what Glass-Steagall banks would mean, this nation is finished. And it can be finished on any day or any week in the near future. I've been pushing for Glass-Steagall as absolutely necessary. We also need something in addition to Glass-Steagall. We need the actual reestablishment of a credit system for the United States. That is, where the federal government will create a pool of lendable currencies on approval for projects which are deemed responsible. We need those things. For example, we have a number of large projects for the United States. We've been losing everything. You take the central states of the United States, they've been destroyed. over the past years. The worst things have happened since, again, Bush came in, young Bush came in, and Obama, and we've really destroyed the food-producing section of the United States. We no longer have the ability to guarantee a food supply for the people of the United States. That is something which we have to deal with.
Why do the globalists, why do the eugenicists always obsess on making people dependent? I know the answer, because that's the name of the game, total control. But expanding on this, when you talk about we could be finished any day financially, here's a headline at Infowars.com, breaking, only covered by a local ABC News channel. Chase customers see bank account balance reduced to zero. Glitch stokes panic on Twitter. Now, that was just a glitch, but describe what you're saying, sir, could happen overnight. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, what was done in terms of the hyperinflation done, which has gone on, we are absolutely bankrupt. And it's the banks, the big banks, which are the problem. You have to put this thing through bankruptcy reorganization now as a preventive measures to enable us to start a program of economic growth. Without a radical change in economic growth, without the end to this so-called green policy, the United States is doomed. The green policy is the greatest enemy inside the United States. It's also the enemy launched by Britain. Europe is full of it. So the very fact we are not producing the amount of food required to maintain our population.
And look at how Greece and Spain have adopted it, and they admit it's wrecked them. And China can build 3 new plants a week. We can't even have 1 a year. For those that don't know, explain to them, sir, what the so-called green movement really is.
Well, the idea, very clear. In the Denmark attempt to establish a world tyranny on that basis of the Queen's idea, they came out with this idea of actually genocide. The Queen's policy, and it's not just her personal policy, it's the policy of the British Empire, is to reduce the world's population from the present estimated level of 7 billion persons to the order of 1.2 billion people. That is the policy, and if you look around you, you look in Europe, you know that is the policy in practice. It was under this influence that we shut down the food production in the Central Plains area. We do not presently produce enough food to take care of the entire U.S. population. We are on a policy of reduction of population. And when you talk about that, what the Queen has insisted upon, and all of the people associated with her on this, is to reduce the human population rapidly now from 7 million people level to 1.2.
Sir, we got a long segment coming up. Let's expand on that, because if it's a new listener out there tuning in for the first time, maybe saying, what on earth are they talking about? The Queen doesn't run anything. We're going to explain the fact that she does. And break that down with Lyndon LaRouche. We'll also give you the websites. It's LaRouchePAC.com, just LaRouche, PAC.com. Here's one of the headlines up at PrisonPlanet.com and Infowars.com. Chase customers see bank balance reduced to zero. Millions of Chase Bank customers were affected by an unfortunately timed glitch, which resulted in their checking and savings accounts showing a zero balance for several hours yesterday, prompting many to take to Twitter and express panic that their money had been stolen, probably another test. Reaction to the glitch was undoubtedly made more intense by the fact that the top global news story yesterday was how residents of Cyprus were facing a mandatory tax that would see 10% of their savings plundered by the banker bailout. And again, there is the problem, and we have a link to ABC News 7 reporting it. This is not a national story. It's only on that local news station. It should be a national story. It is now via Infowars.com, because it shows you that they can devalue your currency overnight. Weimar Republic or Zimbabwe style, or they can just simply take the money out of your account, which is what Davos and the globalists are calling for more and more. And I'm going to talk to Lyndon LaRouche about that and continue with some of the solutions that he's developed from his deep historical understanding. Now, Lyndon, I want to move quicker with you through a bunch of subjects and get into some of the topics you think are most important. But what do you say about supporting alternative press like what you're doing over there with LaRouche PAC, LaRouche Pub? I mean, how important is that? Because obviously the New World Order, globalist, eugenics media, the post-industrial media, they're not going to tell us the victories we're having. But that's not me putting perfume on a pig or putting out pro-propaganda like a cheerleader. As ham-fisted and primitive as I am at many levels, I've been very effective. You've been very effective in your 60 years of fighting. But now, when I go out on the street of Austin or even go to other cities, instead of every fifth person stopping me, it's every other person. Or sometimes everyone in a restaurant comes over. Sometimes every person I see hiking on the Greenbelt comes over. I mean, the popularity of our broadcast, let's not exaggerate, is growing fourfold every year right now, and is extremely viral. What does that say towards your awakening and how important it is for people to support you and others?
Well, there are several things to consider. First of all, there is people are frightened. They're disgusted as well as frightened. And that's a fact. But that doesn't give you the answer. That does not give you the solution. More people are upset by these conditions. But that being upset does not solve the problem. You have to have measures which are concrete. You have to mobilize people around such measures. You have to make the changes in policy, especially in economic policy, which are essential to save this nation from extinction. And not only our nation, but our nation has a very significant role that most Americans no longer recognize. Because we are a special creation. We have a history. One could go into that. But the point is, we were destroyed and corrupted from within. Many of our presidents have been corrupting agents. Some other presidents have saved us. But the United States has an inherent role in the history of mankind, in the entire history of mankind, which is absolutely unique. And it's something that started essentially with Columbus's travels across the Atlantic as a discoverer. It came into Massachusetts. Massachusetts was crushed. Then Massachusetts people like Benjamin Franklin fought back and created a new kind of nation which had never existed to man's knowledge before. Now, we still have, through the way we handle immigration, we took people who were poor from all over the world. We brought them into the United States. They went through successive generations of rising in terms of their condition, their culture, and so forth. We in the United States are actually the pivot of the possibility of maintaining this planet, really, as for us, and that sort of thing. But if we fail, if we drop the ball, if we no longer provide that kind of leadership, which was brought into Massachusetts, and is a part of this Columbus sequel, if we drop the ball, the world is doomed. They need us. And many parts of the world know they need us, or they need us in some respect. In China, there's a recognition in China today that the United States is needed. There's an acute sense of Russia. The United States is needed. You have people in Europe who are suffering, threatened by destruction of their whole nation. They need us. But let's talk about the globalists that have hijacked America. You've talked about their exterminism, ultra-Hitlerian mindset, Hitler being one of their creations. But for many years you've pointed out that the ruling class are insane. And I understand that they're very intelligent, have intelligent bureaucracies that know how to deceive. But knowing their mindset or their tropism, what is the real state of the world right now? I mean, quantify that and then where it's going. I think my experience and my knowledge of history, this is not merely a matter of how many people are bad or so forth. It's a question, do we have a part of our population which is able to contribute leadership, which, most people were born in history, modern history, and even ancient history, were born as poor people, poorly educated, downtrodden, oppressed. They didn't have good knowledge. And then once in a while, like with Charlemagne, you had somebody comes up and creates a whole new system, then he dies, and very soon after that, what he had accomplished disintegrated. So the idea of the quality of leadership, of people who are dedicated and capable of understanding what leadership is.
That's why you see civilizations appear, grow, and then collapse of their own corruption. We definitely have that same brain rot, but now we have nuclear weapons. And we see all the armies lining up, and then we see the bankers looting people's private bank accounts when it's impossible to pay off the derivatives. What do they think they're going to do in the city of London? What do...
Well, you could say there's something satanic about the British monarchy, and you go back and if you know the history, and very few people do know the history, though it's available for them, the British Empire is a product of the Roman Empire. And when the Roman Empire... The
Venetian black nobility. So explain their game plan. Exactly. Explain how the Queen runs things.
First of all, you had the Roman Empire disintegrated in a large degree. The leading families of the Roman Empire went up the Adriatic and became Venetians. And the Venetians went through a crisis, and then you had a second Venetian. Then you had a Venetian called William of Orange. William of Orange invaded Britain, invaded and jolly committed genocide against the Irish, which is one of the sports of the British monarchy these days still. And therefore, what we got into this kind of situation. We now have still the legacy of the Roman Empire in particular, which is a strong force culturally in Europe, and is in terms of, for example, take the case of in some of our presidents, and we found what happened is the British banks moved in, taking over a presidency, moved in to the New York area and the Massachusetts area. The British bankers, British banking system, imperial banking system, took control of the United States up to the time of the Civil War. The Lincoln broke that off, but then the same thing came back again. And
this was in all our newspapers, and then in 22 with Proud House and the CFR. This was the public battle. I mean, what you're talking about was front page news for 100+ years. Nowadays, it's conspiracy theory. Just like if you told an ancient that the moon, really wasn't a man, that it was a rock satellite, they would think you were a conspiracy theorist. The level of ignorance, but you're saying you're seeing a rediscovery of this.
Yeah, that's what we are seeing in the population now. They're disgusted. The hatred against Obama, mixed with the fear of Obama, is what is defining thing. And also, what's happening, the political parties, which thought they were solid, Republican and Democrat, are no longer that. They say still exist in terms of name, but if you look at the inside of the discussions...
Same people.
Yeah.
So they're putting out a hoax that he's been endorsed, that he's loved, but all the real evidence shows total collapse of confidence. I hear our police chief on local radio saying there's been a collapse in confidence. I'm not bad. I'm not with the bad guys. And I hear other police chiefs and people talking like that. And I hear other mainline hosts admitting across the board, we've got tyranny. I agree with you that there is an epiphany beginning to happen right now. Let me ask you this question. The thousands of armored vehicles being deployed, the checkpoints, the 2 billion bullets, the urban warfare drills, the military admits they've been told to prepare for gun confiscation. That's in the Army manuals now. But then Obama's people stonewall and say there are no drones, there are no bullets. What is this domestic buildup for?
What you're talking about really a situation which is going toward thermonuclear war. So that the idea that there's some power more powerful than the issue of thermonuclear war is a piece of idiocy. The world is threatened by thermonuclear war. Now, a thermonuclear war is not just a war. It is not throwing missiles at something. This is a process which, if undertaken with the capabilities which now exist, that thermonuclear war launched within 1 hour can result in the extinction of the human species.
Wow, so you're saying they're gearing up domestically because they're getting ready for nuclear war?
Not really. It goes together with that. But it's not a simple scheme.
How does the nuclear war start? On the Korean Peninsula or in Europe?
No, it starts from London. the British Empire. Look, you have to, if you look at what's happened in the British system recently, you see what happened, the unnecessary long Iraq War. Tony Blair did it. Tony Blair is the controller of the current president of the United States. He was the guy that put him in on behalf of the British Queen. We've been going toward hell. And wait, we have the other side of the thing is, at the same time, we are faced with threats in the solar system, with threats of comets, which come into the solar system and can kill a lot of people if they ever hit the area.
Now, you said that last year on my show, and the media made fun of you about it, but now we're seeing a record numbers of large asteroids coming in and blowing up. How did you know about that?
Well, that's my business, to know those kinds of things.
No, I understand. You. I mean, in fact, you were the guy, the presenter of the idea of a global space defense system.
No, I started that in the sense that I was on my own at a certain point in the late 1970s in Europe. And when I began to push this process, I found people who've been veterans of the OSS, who were still leading survivors of the OSS, and others who agreed with me, and we came together, and I had some dealings with the Soviet system, and also they were going to collapse, and I told them so, and they knew it. And a large number of them were willing to come over and work with us on this whole problem.
That's right, because there were two CIA directors that said you were one of the best analysts alive. Which one was it that told Reagan that he should adopt your policies? I have to pull the Washington Post back up.
There were a lot of them. There were a number of people, but there were also leading people. Generally came from the OSS background. You had people who were still leading people whose background was essentially OSS.
And you were on record saying the Soviets were going to collapse before other people were. Why did they respect you so much? What were you telling them?
I just told them what the truth was, and they knew the truth, but they had to have somebody tell them that. They knew that we almost had the SDI success at the time that Reagan was leading that charge. We almost had it, but the British put in a new stooge Soviet leader who mobilized all his British cronies, and therefore, that we were turned down on that basis. But Reagan always...
Well, the media also turned it into a weapon system instead of a missile defense, but also asteroid defense, right?
The idea was we all knew, including key people of the Soviet system and related systems, we knew that the Soviet Union was doomed. Now, rather than going out with a big flaming nonsense, can't we come to an agreement on policies, international policies, which avoid this threat of general warfare and undertake cooperation among nations to deal with our problems? And
so you were a liaison behind the scenes on what led to perestroika, but they never got to that because their people got in. Who was Gorbachev?
Gorbachev was an evil fellow. He's still around, I think. But he was not. He was the second man in this operation. But this was, if you find the peculiar thing about the Soviet system, and in Russia today, there's still that kind of problem. Most of these guys were called the Marxists. The real Marxists were British operated, like Bertrand Russell's crowd. Bertrand Russell was one of the most significant penetrators of the Soviet system you ever saw, and continued to.
And he was really a eugenicist.
He was everything. He's a human being hater.
I want to hold him a little bit, 5 minutes of the next hour, if he can. If he's got to go, I understand. But when he boils it all down to thermonuclear war, that's where this is going. And the Russians, the U.S., they're building more bases, more weapons, while saying nothing's going on. But if you study geopolitical developments the last 100 years, more is going on than has ever gone on. And the establishment in Europe, England, and the U.S. is behaving in their actions, not their rhetoric, like all Hades is about to break loose. And they're doing incredibly bold and criminal things, putting al-Qaeda in all over the Middle East, demonizing patriot groups in America, clearly getting ready for false flags. Lyndon LaRouche, I'll tell you what I see happening. I see them gearing up to stage terror events to blame on the American people, like Oklahoma City, to go after kind of libertarian populist, and also they're demonizing any type of progressive populist that they don't control. I see a real move towards authoritarianism by Obama with his left cover, his invasion of Africa under AFRICON. I mean, the globalists, it seems, are on the offense. Is that a form of defense, and what do they expect to get out of this, and how do we reverse them taking us on a path that you predicted will lead to thermonuclear war?
Now, this is a cult. The problem is a cult. The cult is that of the British monarchy. And if you look at the banking system, the key to this operation is you've got to go to the way the banking system was set up under Rome all the way through Britain. It is that international banking system which is the organizing center of all of these operations. The answer is, how do you influence people? You buy them. And you find that many of our, for example, senators and so forth that I know, they have been bought. That's why they do what they do. Why are we controlled? Under Jackson, for example, we were bought. The British bankers, based in the New York region and in Boston, set up the operation which really wrecked the United States for a long period of time. And it's always been, and it's the same thing today.
They also financed the Civil War. That's on record, but people don't know that.
Oh, sure. But the point is that's always been the case. It is British-controlled bankers. But they're not just British. What they do is they represent the legacy of the Roman Empire.
How do the Rothschilds tie in?
The Rothschilds are just instruments of this process. They were picked up as skillful people to play a role for the British monarchy.
Wow, and right now we're in the world breakdown that you predicted, and I've tried to get you to talk about it today, but you'll never talk about yourself in a past tense. But you have been screaming since the mid-'90s that they were going to create derivatives and do this, and now it's happening. How do we get out of that? Bring back Glass-Steagall? Glass-Steagall would work if you take a measure of the United States population. I study it and look at it, and deal with it. There is a movement right now. You'll find that the Democratic and Republican Party are no longer cohesive forces against each other. We are about to be freed from that kind of partisanship. What you have is you find people who are classified as New Left or whatever, all Republicans and so forth. They're all different because they have nothing that they can unite about as a united policy. And therefore, you saw that in the results of the recent election. And how is that a good thing? Now we can come into the vacuum with original constitutional ideas. That's right. We don't need a Congress which is a majority feature. We need a system of government, which is our constitutional system, which is responsive to what our needs are. All right, it's our final segment with Lyndon LaRouche, and I wanted to go to calls. He was happy to do that. We never did because of time constraints. LaRouchePack.com. And he's got several other really top-flight websites. You can see it there on screen of your TV viewer. Sir, finishing up with solutions here with you. I mean, Dick Cheney is so arrogant and a globalist agent that he wrote in the PNAC document, September 20th, we should get the media to legitimize the use of race-specific bioweapons. And there wasn't even a media outcry. Our local paper wrote about it, the Austin Market-Statesman. But that gives you a mindset into the exterminism cult, death cult thing. I mean, you're not just saying that. That's who they are. And it transcends party. Obama is one of their, great minions. So how do you counter such pure evil with logic? I guess you go to the people? That's precisely when the people are ready to listen to you. And what we're in a stage now is if you look at as the results for the Democratic Party, the Tea Party, and so forth, as a result of the last election campaign, you see that what came out of there was not a unified, system of congressional rule under a presidency. That is gone. The Republicans could not hold themselves together about in the way they before, nor could the Democrats. The Democrats are still trying in the Senate to do that, but it's not going to work. The
citizens, as we saw with the Rand Paul, the citizens are now acting on the basis of their own conscience. Not everyone, but a significant number, and the number is growing.
And as that happens, they're not going to be able to control the narrative anymore.
No, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the Constitution, in which the state constitution, the state government, rules the state, in which the states cooperate together as states. And they're not going to cooperate on the basis of partisanship as such. They're going to cooperate on the basis of what they think the interest of the nation is from the standpoint of their state. And once we get back to that, which is our original constitutional system, we can make it. We have a situation like right now with Russia and the United States. Our leading military command is now in the meeting with Russia on cooperating against the threat. And
that's what Hagel said. He said the military's rebelling against Obama, but I see them firing all these people because they won't launch wars.
Well, it's going to go in various directions. We are not going to end up with fighting wars. Because when you start talking about fighting wars, you're talking about the use of weapons systems which do not allow you to come out alive.
That's right.
In a war. So therefore, now the time has come that we're going to have to really realize the intention of our Constitution. We're going to stop trying to dictate things, trying to take power. We're going to cooperate with other nations, but as sovereign nations in their own right. We're going to cooperate. The greatest thing that threatens us today is a threat from in space, from asteroids, from comets, and so forth.
Well, that's right. We're always focusing on just the planet. What about the whole universe around us?
Mankind has reached the point that we are actually now going to establish the interplanet system, or part of the interplanet system, which is habitable and approachable. We are going to find ourselves running a certain part of the solar system, which is going to be the solar systems where man lives. Now, we're not going to go into Mars right away to live there as human beings, but we are in the process of two things. One, Mars is now an area in which mankind is going to build up systems and begin to work with that planet as a planet to deal with some of our problems. We're going to do the same thing in other cases. So we are now in a point where we're going to defend mankind in this section of the solar system.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.